Hello to a new Let's Play on my channel. This is, well, I don't know what will happen. It's a story-based novel game, you could say. So I have to read a lot. And I hope this is working, because it was created for an older Android version. So let's start Ambre. We will play in English. It was 7 p.m. on that beautiful yet cold autumn day. The wind shook the frail trees' branches across the street. Okay. Tristan Mallory made his slow, tired way. A whirlwind of leaves caught his attention, and he stopped to contemplate them for a few minutes. A spray of colors danced around him. Fragments of reds, oranges, yellows spread at random, forming a mosaic that stretched on for as far as the eye could see, endlessly. It was rare beauty in that grey and fuming city, in that noisy metropolis constantly exhaling bad air. Coming back to his senses, the 30-year-old man shook his head. Now wasn't the time to be daydreaming. He had to go home. The long day weighed on his shoulders. But if he was honest with himself, work wasn't the most tiring thing in his life. Since honest, well-paid work was somewhat of a luxury these days, like any model employee, he consciously accomplished every task handed to him and did no more or less than what was asked. No, what was destroying him was a completely different form of fatigue, an appalling and crushing solitude that had been shadowing him for years, ever since his wife. The light tinkle of the front door opening brought him back to earth. He was already at his flat. A sad and mute living room sat waiting for him in morbid silence. Goosebumps traveled down his spine as he entered the room. Driven by desperation, he didn't even take the time to hang his coat correctly, but began slamming all of the doors, one after the other. Each time, the same emptiness answered his pleas. He felt a rising dread within. His last hope was the last door in the forbidden room beyond. He opened it slightly and peeked inside. Of course, there was no one. He fell heavily onto the sofa. The crushing solitude came back in full force, crushing him again and again, wounding his face with invisible cuts, the cuts of time. It was happening again. All of a sudden, Tristan Mallory felt exhausted. He held his head in his hands and stared at the floor for long minutes. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he got to his feet. He moved to gather all of the framed pictures that had been on the furniture and stowed them away in a closet. They needed to be out of sight. When he was sure that there were no more pictures to put away, Tristan put his coat back on and went outside. Oh, there was a mistake. He was wearing his coat. And now he puts it on again. Weird. It was cool, a bit dark, but there was still enough light to see by. It was the ideal time to take a walk. At least that's what he would have thought. As he hurried along the sidewalk, the 30-year-old man was anything but relaxed. Nervously, he walked around to most familiar places looking for a serenity that seemed to be out of reach. While passing a park near his home, he heard a high-pitched, almost inaudible plea. His heart jumped, and he stopped. While passing a park near his home, he heard a high-pitched, almost inaudible plea, what I said before. In the dim light of the setting sun, he made out the silhouette of a little girl sitting on a swing with her head bowed. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Afraid of startling her, he made his way toward her slowly and looked at her. Her clothes were crumpled. She had neither coat nor scarf, and there were scratches on her hands and arms, as if she had been in a fight. The park was completely deserted, and she seemed to have been there for a while. For a second, Tristan Mallory felt the urge to leave her there to whatever fate lay in store for her. But then he mentally chastised himself. He couldn't do that to a child. So he knelt in front of her and asked in a soft voice, "Is something wrong?" At first, the little girl seemed not to hear him. She choked on her sobs, hiccuped, and shuddered. Slowly, Tristan Mallory stroked her hair and repeated, "Why are you crying? What happened?" It took long minutes for her to calm down enough to speak, but eventually, with a faint voice interrupted by sobs, she wiped at her tears and answered him. I don't know. I think I've lost something important. Really important. But I can't remember what it was." Tristan Mallory sighed, feeling a mixture of compassion and pity. She seemed so lost, so vulnerable. He wanted to hold her so tightly that her sadness melted away. And at the same time, within him, a voice was telling him that he shouldn't be too forceful. He shouldn't take advantage of her weakness. So he tried to not lose face, to look reassuring, yet in front of this sad little girl, he did not feel self-confident at all. "Are you all alone? Where are Mommy and Daddy?" "I don't know." "Do you live far away from here?" "I don't know." "What's your name?" "Ambre." "Well, Ambre, you can't stay here out in the wind, or you're going to catch a cold. And you don't want to get sick, do you?" "No, I hate being sick." "See, you've got to go warm yourself up somewhere. The night's getting close." "But I don't know where to go." "In that case, what do you think about going over to my place? It's not far away from here, and it will make a much better sleeping place than the swing." Ambre seemed wary at first, but she had no other choice but to follow him. He gently reached a hand to her, and for the first time she lifted her eyes. They were washed out, blurry with tears and hesitant. He thought it a good idea to show her a smiling face, to appear to be a reassured adult. Even with the fatigue, he caught her fine and frail hand and helped her get to her feet. The young girl's steps were wobbly and weak. She had probably not eaten all day long. He held her hand, making sure she wouldn't trip. The 30-year-old man removed his coat and shut the door behind them. "Make yourself at home. I'll cook you something." Passing through the kitchen, he turned on the light in the living room so his flat would look less gloomy. While roaming through his fridge looking for a good meal idea, he stole several glances over the counter. In the living room, Ambre was still walking around, a bit wild, still on the defense. She explored this new environment by looking around, admiring the ornaments. She didn't find much to pique her interest. It was a bland house, almost too bland. There were no clues about the occupants' lives. Taking advantage of Tristan's being distracted by a packet of noodles, she escaped to the hallway and tried to find the bathroom. She found it quickly enough before returning to the hallway. Then she noticed that all the doors were wide open, except for one. She was drawn to that doorway even before she had time to think. Intrigued, Ambre felt magnetically attracted by the slightly opened door. Just one peek was all she wanted, but she couldn't see anything through the crack. Was this Bluebeard's cabinet? The frightening tomb where Tristan Mallory stored the corpses of his former wives? The little girl pushed the door open, entered the room, and switched the light on. It was a bedroom with soft cushions filled with plushes. A big bed proudly throned in the center of the room was accompanied by a pretty dressing table to one side. The walls were painted to look like a bright blue sky. The storage furniture, coordinated with the sweet colors of trinkets, were overflowing with mysteries. On the nightstand, she could catch a glimpse of a nightlight shaped as a cute mascot. There was a fairy-like ambience about this strange room, so that Ambre couldn't repress a little exclamation of surprise. Closing the door so that the 30-year-old wouldn't discover her hiding spot, she stretched out on the colorful bed, rolled into a ball, jumped about, and snuck under the bed sheets. For an inexplicable reason, she felt at ease in this room worthy of a princess. It seemed to have been built for her, to correspond to her every fantasy. Then she noticed a big teddy bear which seemed to stare at her. Immediately she grabbed it, hugged it, and covered it with kisses. Her pale face was illuminated by a wide, pure, innocent smile. A child's smile. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Tristan Mallory finished cooking the noodles. He was about to serve the meal when he noted the absence of the little girl. Slightly worried, he called for her. Ambre? Ambre, where are you? Nervous, he looked after her in all the rooms, checking to see if she was in the bathroom. He searched everywhere in the house until there were only... The entry door makes some noises when it's opened. I would have heard it if she had left. Can she be in there already? With a contrite sigh, he headed towards the forbidden room and found Ambre playing with stuffed animals. His gaze softened. I suppose that I can't do anything, he thought to reassure himself. Without a word, he went to sit next to her. On the bed, the little girl moved the stuffed animals' hands while making them speak. In her weak voice, she was narrating a stuffed animal tea party and seemed to be enjoying herself. The light was back in her eyes. Suddenly, she got mad at a plump cow and scolded her harshly. It's dirty! Stop it right now! You're making a mess! Ellie, what did I just say? It's dirty! You've got to behave yourself! And don't roll on the floor. You shouldn't make a fuss just because you didn't get what you wanted. Oh. No. The stuffed animal tea party hosted by the blue monkey was obviously not going as planned. The 30-year-old man eyed the little girl's every move with care. She finally noticed his presence. He felt he had to speak. Are you having fun? Yeah, I didn't know that there was a bedroom like this in your house. Whose room is it? It was my wife's favorite room before she left. What happened to her? It's a long story. Maybe I will tell you another time. Meanwhile, the meal is getting colder. Do you want to eat? Of course. What do we eat? Bolognese sauce with pasta. Great. I love it. That evening, Tristan Mallory admired Ambre as she wolfed down her food. He felt half amused, half distracted. Seeing her so happy soothed his heart a little, but at the same time... Are you tired? The child asked suddenly, with a serious air. A little. I worked hard today. She said nothing. Still amazed by the princess's bedroom, she revived the topic with starry eyes. Do you like it? Yeah, a lot. I wish I had a similar room. If you want, I'll give it to you. Really? My wife left a long time ago. Her stuff is still inside and I don't use it. So, if you like, it's yours. You can stay in her room while I'm looking for your parents and what you lost. What do you say? Can I? Really? But it doesn't belong to me. There's nothing sadder than a house without life, isn't it? I know that my wife loved the rest in her favorite room. There she felt at ease, like on a cloud. But now, she's not living here anymore. You seem to like this place, so I think it would make her happy to know that her bedroom is in good hands. And I can do whatever I want to in it? While I'm at work, you'll be able to play in this room as much as you want. I'll leave you some leftovers for the lunch. You'll only have to heat them up in the microwave. I'm sorry. And in the evening, we'll play together if you'd like to. Do I need to go to school? No more school. Only games. Yay! Great then! In front of Amber's overflowing enthusiasm, Tristan Mallory couldn't help but smile faintly, almost pitifully. Yes, that's it indeed, he kept telling himself, as if to reassure himself. All I'm doing is keeping her around until she remembers who she is and what she's lost. Waiting for her to remember. Thus began their strange routine. Tristan Mallory woke up early in the morning to go to work, but before leaving and rushing into the fog, he had to take a few minutes of preparation to face the daily grind, a few brief minutes on the threshold of her door, gazing at the sleeping Ambre. Then he ran away through the streets covered by dead leaves, escaping far away, toward the mountains of paperwork, toward the baleful tower furnished by waste offices, where the slaves chained to the computers toll away for the lord of that place. Anyway, that was what the little girl thought his working day looked like. As for her, she woke up easily around 9 a.m. and her first reflex was to stretch and yawn in front of the cartoons with a bowl of cereals in hand. She followed her favorite heroines' adventures. All of them were beautiful and courageous. All of them were friends for life, princesses with elegant superpowers covered with light effects and flower petals. Rich and loved, they lived a perfect and inviolable existence, especially the main character, who owned a bedroom very similar to Ambre's. It was colorful and filled with cute accessories. However, this room was only a part of a bigger palace furnished the same way. How I would like to live in a castle as well. With her cute friends, the heroine hunted the villains, fell into traps and called for the help of her charming prince, an ideal and fantasized man who served her hand and food. Life seemed easy, full of laughs and adventures. All that was needed was to send back the nasty woman to her hiding place in the darkness. After all, she was nasty because she envied the young, dazzling girls. Nasty because she was old and disillusioned. Amber would have loved to have magical powers allowing her to make cute outfits appear, allowing her to have a stable where unicorns slept, allowing her to have a ballroom where she could organize extravagant parties based on beautiful dresses and cupcakes. It was always really disappointing for her to see the end of the episode. Of course, there were other programs, but the story with magical jewels was her favorite one. When the cartoons ended, she went to fill in her coloring books, daydreaming about being among those heroines. And then, at midday, she heated up the leftovers that Tristan had left and went back watching TV. New programs evaded her. Again, she had a favorite, the one where a little girl owned a puppy that was different from the others. It was a red puppy who could sneak around. It was so very adorable, with its big eyes and its comical expressions, that it made her melt. How I would like to have a dog that cute! The meal passed quickly to the rhythm of opening songs that she knew by heart. This was usually the time when Tristan called to make sure everything was okay. She never missed this opportunity to tell him the content of the episodes of the day, how the heroine had defeated the evil witch with her magic mirror, how the little dog had helped her mistress at school, and so on. Relieved, he would start eating his sandwiches without appetite, sated more by the little girl's words than by his meal. She hung up, satisfied with her story. Then, after the last cartoon, turned off the television to rest in her big bed, surrounded by her stuffed toys. Usually at this time, she read a fairy tale. She loved to tell herself the story of Cinderella again and again, while sucking her teddy bear's ear. it was a favorite. People and life itself were nasty with Cinderella every day. She had to work hard, it was exhausting. She had to earn her every meal, and the nasty, ugly sisters believed themselves superior. Unfortunately, the prince recognized the heroine's natural talent. She was pretty, and she was special. He brought her with him to his castle to live a golden existence, where she wouldn't have to work her fingers to the bone, where the money flowed freely, where Cinderella could have everything she wanted, including all the things that shone, accessories, dresses, cakes. All she had to do to fill time was to organize parties with her friends. The ugly sisters were not invited. They were too ugly, too rude, and they did not deserve such a paradise. Cinderella was happy. She loved in the manner of the only real or true love, the kind of love with gilding and glitter. For what more could she ask? Ambre fell asleep happy, hoping to meet her charming prince one day. She dreamed of the one who would only have eyes for her and would give her a room like the one the princesses that she admired so much had. When she opened her eyes, the little girl rushed again in the living room to watch a tape, a Disney film. Depending on her mood, she chose one with animals or one with a couple who lived happily ever after. Often she watched Snow White or The Little Mermaid. Ambre loved the idea of a glass coffin containing a body which would not grow old despite death, but that would remain always young and beautiful, lying in wait for the magical kiss that would free her of her prison, changing the course of her story and spiriting her away from the common hut of proletarian dwarfs who, while friendly, were also rough. She loved it just as she loved the idea of a beautiful and rebellious mermaid swimming through the oceans, looking for treasures but sacrificing her freedom for the man in her life, about whom she had fantasized 1,000 times. The beautiful and rebellious mermaid never listened to anyone, which reminded her of her own condition. She too was as sweet and capricious a young woman. She played these movies in a loop, day after day, until snack time came. By then, tired of their idyllic images, she dug into the sweets that Tristan bought for her. Cupcakes, colorful macarons, pastries, bread and Nutella. Of course, she ate in front of the television. There were cartoons at this time as well. As it was getting late, she finally pushed the off button to resume her fantasies elsewhere in her room, wielding her dolls with skill, perfectly depicting the course of her dreams. But the high point of each day was surely when Tristan finally returned from work. She knew he was there from the creaking of the door. She would rush into the living room and, all joyous, she would throw herself at him, timidly at first, then with more enthusiasm over the weeks. She loved being carried on his shoulders to mimic the airplane and to fly through the flat until they crashed on the bed, laughing. Playing together was so much fun. With her friend, she could give life to her characters more easily. Her favorites? Playing Mommy and Daddy. Ambre took the role of the mother and always took good care of the well-being of her child, a PVC doll, with dad eyes supposed to embody an adorable little baby. She washed him, changed him, cuddled him, and gave him his bottle. Tristan had the role of the father. He had to read the newspaper in the kitchen while waiting for his wife to cook him a good meal. A role which hardly got him involved, but he was very well satisfied with that. Ambre took her task very seriously. She had the lead role, after all. Therefore, she served her imaginary husband plastic fries and fruits with a bossy pout. He appreciated the gesture. However, the real meal was left to Tristan's charge once the game ended. A meal which the little girl took as an opportunity to tell the rest of her fabulous adventures. Tristan only had to listen to her with a smile on his face, before he required her to go to the bathroom to wash up and brush her teeth. Ambre always grumbled at the bathroom's time, but her sexless mermaid Barbie quickly helped her to forget the inconvenience. More than once, she slyly waited for the 30-year-old man to come close enough for her to shoot him with a fish-shaped water gun. Innocent laughter would ensue. Then he tucked her into her big princess's bed while telling her a story, usually a fairy tale. In those moments, she blinked more and more slowly, looking up at him with a touching expression. It could make Tristan melt from cuteness. He was careful not to close the door all the way. The corridor's light had to hunt the monsters which could disturb Ambre's sleep. It was a specific request. She was fearful. The 30-year-old man had to protect her from ghosts at the slightest shout. That was his promise to her. Before going to sleep, Tristan Mallory found some comfort in seeing her asleep. He hoped that her sleep would be inhabited with nice dreams, and that she wouldn't forget him, that she would think about him in whatever way it may be. Could she even feel his presence, or how much he cared for her? Their schedule allowed the weekend to turn into a more festive time. It was the time for outings. It was out of the question for Amber to be bored, that she stayed indoor again in the tight and bleak flat. She had to see some landscape. So they went to lively places. The pool, the amusement park, the ice rink, the cinema, restaurants. She had to try everything. Every week was a different universe. Running along at a brisk pace with her impeccably polished shoes, the little girl jumped from right to right while hanging on Tristan's arm. It warmed his heart to see her having innocent fun. In front of a smile that big, he could only imitate the little girl's good mood, despite himself. Often when she asked for a dessert, a pancake or an ice cream, he saw out of the corner of his eye that she had whipped cream on her face. The temptation to lick the dab of ice cream from the tip of her nose or the corner of her lips was nearly too much. Such a thing, both childish and unhealthy, tickled his darkest thoughts, most pitiful thoughts. However hard he rejected them, his hands became sweaty and trembling, confessing his torment. But Amber couldn't understand. Amber was a little girl, only a little girl. The months flew by at breakneck speed. Tristan refused to admit it, but his young charge was growing. He wanted to ignore the fact, to close his eyes, but the unstoppable passage of time had already done its work. Ambre was going through a strange crisis. That evening, she was particularly angry and proclaimed rigorously, "I don't want to be a child anymore." "How so?" "I want to become older." "But you have plenty of time for this, Amber." "But I want to grow faster. I could do more things." The 30-year-old man sighed. He obviously did not know how to answer such assertions. He had never had a child, and he was not very good at placating others, regardless. Taken aback, he left the girl to pout in the living room while he went to take a long, relaxing shower. While he was soothing his worries in the rush of hot water, she was seething. "That's not fair. I wish I could be older right now. If I only had a model. I wonder what Tristan's wife looked like, for example. I'm sure that she was kind. But he never wants to talk about her. He avoids the subject. Maybe he's hiding something." Intrigued, Amber took advantage of his absence to open a drawer she had never touched before. Inside was a big leather notebook. She was sure she had found a treasure. So she took it and opened it. It was a photo album. Spread on the pages were bright smiles and tender gestures. Browsing the pictures, the little girl discovered her guardian, young and fresh, in the arms of a coquettish young lady. Dressed soberly and tastefully, she was strolling along the seashore with a shawl on her shoulders. Another picture showed her in a park holding an ice cream. But what caught her eye was a one specific picture that towered in the center of the page. Tristan, wearing a suit, was leading his lover out of a church with clumsy footsteps under a shower of flower petals. She looked so happy, so fulfilled in her big and refined white dress that Ambre was stupefied. Even more so because the bride looked exactly like her. She's so pretty. What are you looking at? Tristan's sudden appearance made her jump so quickly that she dropped the forbidden object. The 30-year-old man's gaze darkened immediately. You searched through the closet to see what my wife looked like, didn't you? She answered in a shaky voice, guilty. Yes. Are you going to scold me? Of course not. I just would have preferred that you didn't see it. Why? Why don't you ever tell me about her? I want to know. He sighed, appearing upset as he looked into those begging eyes that he had never been able to resist for long. Reluctantly, he sat down on the couch and told her how he had met the one he thought would be his lifelong partner, and related all that they had gone through together. Ambre listened with wide-eyed attention. She liked his story very much. Tristan seemed to get younger as he evoked the past, describing how head over heels for her he had been and how happy she made him. Their peaceful and ordinary everyday life was something the little girl envied. Caught up in the tale, she couldn't help but pressure him. And then what happened? Until the light shining in the man's green eyes brutally vanished. Then she got away. Where to? Far away. Oh, come on. To a place I can't reach anymore. Every day I pray that she'll somehow hear me. That she'll wake up. That she'll remember me. I don't know if she'll ever emerge from that dream that's keeping her captive. Is she dead? Sometimes it feels like it. But no, she's alive, just in a different world from mine. If I could have joined her, I would have. I would have sacrificed everything for her. And today, she's forgotten me forever. That's sad. Tristan sighed again, head down, as a heavy, crushing silence came between them. Ambre started at the photo, bewitched by the woman's smile. Deep down in her heart, she had an odd thought. If I was older, I could replace Tristan's wife, and he wouldn't be sad anymore. That night, she left the devastated Tristan lying as immobile as a statue on the sofa. Slipping between the covers of her cozy bed sheets, she felt helpless. If only I was older. The thought took root more violently in her mind to the point where it became an emergency. She had to become Tristan Mallory's wife. A new routine seized little Ambre. It was out of the question for her to stay a little girl. She wanted to grow as prematurely as a butterfly, its beauty cursed by its ephemeral life. Thus began a kind of adolescence. She no longer woke up in the morning when the 30-year-old went to work. She waited until midday to surface and took her meal at that time. Tristan did not call at his usual hour anymore. He knew that she would not be in a good mood. After a brief meal, the young girl watched television while leafing through magazines bought with her benefactor's pocket money. Her afternoon ranged between American TV shows and beauty tips, Between the pages of magazines, she learned how to seduce men, a leitmotif she liked a lot. She wanted Tristan to look at her from another angle, and in a different way. To be seen as a woman, she had to act as a woman, but she absolutely didn't know how to do this. These magazines, which were overflowing with tips of all kinds, appeared to be an Eldorado. Through the articles, she learned how to act and how to be a true lady. It wasn't very complicated. She only had to keep a close watch on her gestures, to control her every movement perfectly so as to convey the best image possible. She tracked down all human weaknesses, every inconvenience, and walked with a relaxed air and self-assurance designed not to frighten or crush. Ambre shook her head while she was reading the magazine article. Of course, she had to be open and smiling, but not so much that she came across as exuberant. She had to laugh often, but not too loudly and never in a hysterical manner. She had to be independent while taking initiative, but only if the situation was favorable and at the same time non-threatening. She had to show herself to be as natural as possible while enhancing all her advantages with makeup. Ambre understood the necessity of buying some in order to be a true woman, and finally, to dress in a manner feminine enough to enhance while being at the same time sober enough so as not to attract unwanted attention. Goodness. And then she learned how to listen to men, and that talking too much was a sign of egotism, and that she should be discreet while also present and available for when he really needed it without being too obvious. This is so 60s, isn't it? As she turned page after page, the young girl felt a pressing urge to spend all her money on the products shown in the advertisements and praised by the journalists. After all, she would need them in order to seduce Tristan. How could she have the slightest chance without cheating a little? Furthermore, a revealing psychological test claimed that Ambre would gain more affection acting like a fragile little girl. Men needed to be reassured of their virility and of their protector's role. Also, she was herself too vulnerable, too frail. She couldn't manage anything worthy without help. She had to find validation in his eyes, validation in her very existence. If he thinks that I'm pretty, I'll be pretty, like on that photograph. Like this, Ambre spent her afternoons reading tips, training herself, and concealing herself. When she wasn't watching soap operas, she was shopping in the city to buy clothes, accessories, and cosmetics. The city, like the television, showed her visions of absolute and infinite love, of perfect and pure love. It was a drug, an obligation, a flawless pleasure, and an order. Every billboard sold the same dream. Oh, so cliché. Oh, so desirable. It followed after the fairy tale formula. They all lived happily ever after, with abundant wealth and many children. The heroines of romances and films all ran after the same goal, that of profit, ease, luxury. A life where everything was easy, but where everything had lost its taste. It was a dull life and a hollow one. It was an eternal masquerade. But this existential emptiness was easy to fill. One had only to consume and be consumed. One only needed to devote one's soul to removing every trace of nature to hide the grotesque natural body, the body that was too personal, too imperfect, too real to be replaced with a mirage. One only needed to spend without restraint in order to conquer the piggy bank of one's dreams. That machine that gave banknotes and weak orgasms in order to make oneself into a diamond. A beautiful shiny trinket that everyone should have in one's living room, destroying one's own immaterial value and replacing it with the coin of the realm. Empty one basket in idleness, turning around in one's cage, without purpose to continue living with dignity, wandering like a lost soul, disguised as a clown with too much red paint on the face. The result? A grim robot. One needs to fill the lack, the absence of life, the disease that devours one's blood and all one's authenticity with money. Always more money. Buy, 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 until one forgets discomfort and one's sense of ill-being. Ambre admired today's celebrities, those picture-perfect idols whose bodies exuded not even the slightest trace of life, and whose uninspired songs only glorified a permanent state of pleasure. Pleasure without work. Like massively produced Barbie dolls clones by the dozens, such celebrities merged into a single canon of unsurpassed beauty deemed absolute truth. The stars dived into this endless cycle of vanity with such ease it was truly fascinating. Every minute that passed after a singer's first success was a minute of intense scrutiny as the whole world glued its eyes on the morbid show that was her slow suffocation and imminent drowning. Nothing could bring more exquisite pleasure, nor be a prettier sight, than that of a young woman slowly being engulfed by the shadowy tentacles of their dreams. They sacrificed their bodies to the cuts of plastic surgery scalpels to the point where they no longer resembled themselves anymore, to the point where they transformed into some kind of wonderful monsters. They had rejected their personalities and histories to blend with the world, to conform themselves to the public's every expectation, to become the shop windows of modern times and the faces of a single form of happiness advertised at every street's corner. Happiness that our little Ambre longingly gazed upon. While becoming a star seemed out of her reach, looking like one was a duty that the tabloids never ceased to remind her of. That frivolous media with so little fuss and so many consequences. When Tristan Mallory came home to the end of his working day, he would find Ambre already taking care of him by trying to cook delicious meals. The ever so elegant Ambre craved to always show her best, becoming the perfect little strong-willed housewife. He was past the point of missing the innocent days, but, in all honesty, he didn't understand why the young lady was putting so much effort into becoming such a perfect creature. One evening, while she was cooking a special dish from a recipe she'd learned on TV, the whole thing accompanied by a candlelit table in order to celebrate his birthday, he dared to ask, "Say, Ambre, why are you doing so much for me?" The too honest question came like a hammer's blow. His complete incomprehension sounded like an insult. She'd probably spent hours gazing up in the bathroom to look fresh and at her best, and hours had gone into tidying the house, cleaning every nook and cranny until it was spotless. She'd probably spent hours decorating and hours tending to this godforsaken roast, laboriously cutting vegetables, and here he was asking her why she was trying this hard. The knife in her hands fell violently to the floor, emitting a metallic sound that meant nothing good. "Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?" Ambre's voice trembled dangerously. Getting close, he noticed her frenetically shaking hands. Eyes wide open, soaked in tears, she exploded. "Because I want you to love me. I want you to look at me. Why don't you ever look at me? Am I not good enough? Is that it? I will never be as good as she was, will I?" She? But, Ambre, who are you talking about? Dumbfounded, Tristan held her in his arms as tightly as he could. No, he definitely couldn't understand. He couldn't understand such intense and sudden sobs. Reassured by his gesture, Ambre wanted to explain herself. I'm sorry. I'll never be able to replace her. Who are you trying to replace, Ambre? Tell me. Your wife. I can see her departure left you very sad. I wanted to bring a smile back to your face. I wanted to take her place, so you'd forget about her. For a split second, Tristan Mallory was breathless. It was surreal. He would have pinched himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming, but no, the pain in his chest was far too real, too pitifully carved in him. How could he answer such a declaration? How could he find the right words? Catching his breath, with difficulty, the 30-year-old man took Ambre by the shoulders and looked her in the eyes for a long time. After a sigh, he affirmed, "Listen, I will never be able to forget my wife, right? It's impossible. But that doesn't mean I don't want you. It's the exact opposite, actually. You're very dear to me, Ambre. You hear me? I need you. You already have her place. So please stop crying. Don't make it harder than it is." The young girl shyly dried her tears and her features changed to an adorably naive expression. She looked sincerely despaired. "You okay with me? What made you think I'd abandon you, huh?" "Nothing, it's just that you seem to love her so much. I'm a bit jealous." "Why is that?" "I don't know. When I look at those pictures, I can't help but tell myself I must absolutely make you happy. I think I love you." Tristan felt all the courage and determination he had worked up melting, and he started sobbing as well. "But I love you too. It's always been like that. I love you so much it makes me sick." "For real? You're not treating me like a kid?" "Of course not." Okay, this is going to be very weird. "Then prove it." "How should I?" "Show me you love me like a man loves a woman." You want me to do that?" Amber silently nodded. She seemed that set on it, so Tristan slowly and softly kissed her lips. The warm and pleasurable feeling went to his head. For a few seconds, he felt as if he was holding his wife in his arms. He thought she had really come back. The delicate vanilla-scented skin reminded him of happy days, long afternoons spent in the sun, of laughter, of peaceful evenings under the light of the stars, or by a fire, or beneath a shared umbrella in a storm. She was here, so close, so far, within a finger's reach. He only had to close his eyes and believe in this dream. The illusion smiled faintly at him, and at his limit, he embraced her. "If you only knew how much I love you." He had so many things he wished to tell her, so many that the words got stuck in his throat, unable to escape. So, since he lacked the words to make her understand what he was feeling, he used his body. As dawn's rays of light crept through the window, Ambre was profoundly asleep, lying atop Tristan's still lukewarm body. Eyes surrounded by dark circles, the weight of regrets, a fatigue he couldn't get rid of. He stared at her with a sad smile on his face. "It was only a dream, right? When you wake up, you'll be a kid again, right?" The only answer he got was a light groaning. Softened by such a serene face, he laughed a kiss on her fresh cheeks. As soon as he did, the sleeping lips spread to form a happy smile. "I wonder what you're dreaming about. Say, won't you invite me over there?" From that strange night on, in a paroxysm of lies, Amber got Tristan to agree to be a somewhat official couple. Thus, she asked for an engagement ring and would not hesitate to walk the streets locked to his arm. Soon it wasn't enough anymore. Avidly, voraciously even, she couldn't satisfy herself with the girlfriend status. She needed more. She needed to suppress the woman that was there before her, her invisible rival, whose shadow was always looming like Damocles' sword. So, she would drag Tristan to wedding shops, dreaming of the perfect ceremony and her day of glory. The magazines, the adverts, the TV, the whole world was telling her that was what happiness was. So wasn't it only natural for her to take a hold of it with both hands? Wasn't it every little girl's dream? The wedding was promised and sold like a real-life fairy tale application. A very expansive, beautiful dress, a princess's dress, was necessary. The bride had to be the story's heroine. Everyone would keep their eyes glued on her, and only her, and she would have all the accessories and cosmetics and superficial stuff in which the stars constantly bathed. The famous singers all lived in some sort of permanent wedding, a strange and unlikely fantasy. Amber too wanted to taste this kind of heaven she was constantly told the merits of. So she pushed Tristan to please her. He asked for her hand in marriage, and both of them organized a great ceremony. On that day, Amber, still so frail, seemed to shine more brightly than ever. On that day, Amber thought she had finally erased all traces of her rival. But it still wasn't enough. The life she was living didn't seem perfect enough just yet. She still needed a few things to be entirely fulfilled. She desired to build a family. After all, they had sold marriage to her like a never-ending fairy tale, but she still needed a goal to keep on living. And it was sad that her biological role, her natural role, was, of course, to breed. A real woman should obviously want to become mother. It was an unchanging law that was probably written somewhere in a fragment of DNA code. A real woman should have a child, preferably a girl, so that she could educate her on all the moral codes she had received, a living doll to play with, brush her hair, play tea time with. You had to busy yourself with something to fill your existence, or to access to some kind of eternal fantasy. It depended. This need, a project as a couple, or just an implicit order that came from within? Ambre had read and seen everywhere that those who didn't want kids would automatically be unhappy without realizing it. A major, almost handicapped by selfishness or neurosis. True love should bear fruits, just as the princess should be revealed only by a prince. That's where Cinderella's myth lay. Amber didn't know yet, but the clock had started ticking long ago, and it was dangerously approaching its final moment. Tristan Mallory took the desire of the young lady to procreate coldly. Clumsily, he did his best to pretend that they had a lot of time left, that they'd think about it later on, that he was ready to wait, but she kept insisting more and more. The months went by, and the young lady never tired of telling him all the things she wanted to make of their providential baby, describing from A to Z how she intended to educate it and the sorceries that would be necessary. Tristan Mallory took the desire of the young lady to her biggest wish was to give birth to a little girl. She could gussy up as much as she wished. She sighed, imagining how she would cover her in presents, go shopping with her, become a mix of a cool and friendly big sister-like mother. Excuse me, I'm a mother of a girl. It's not like this. Believe me. What the hell? Scolding? She was way too afraid that her future child would hate her to even think of it. Ay. Her angel would have to love her. It was obvious. She would be a good mother, and everything would go for the best. Amber had an endless stock of arguments to convince Tristan. Motherhood was the realization of a little girl's dream, the logical and infallible consequence of a couple's relationship, the the greatest proof of love that could ever be, a way to conform themselves to the norm. Oh, it's already really late. Oh my god. Months went by, slowly, dreadfully, to the rhythm of Ambre's growing obsession. She was always looking out for a sign, observing her body for the telltale good news. Try after try, she repeated that this time it would work, though she had to admit that something was wrong, that something wasn't working. Even though she tried her hardest, she still wasn't pregnant. A shower of doubt started pouring down on her mind. Tristan tried to minimize the problem, telling her that it wasn't so bad, that it would happen someday, and that they had so many other things to live for together. But it was too late. Ambre wasn't listening anymore. She absolutely needed to go to the doctor to get her body checked up, to understand the problem and to fix it. She wasn't going to give up when she was so close to her goal. Her partner avoided the subject as much as possible, pretending to be distracted and refusing any medical checkup. Every time the young lady went to talk about it, he remained tongue-tied, feeling that the situation was becoming more and more tense. She was getting too close to the truth, and he couldn't afford it. There were too many things at stake. So he held on, trying all that he could to reassure his protégée and convince her to get rid of those unwanted thoughts. But Tristan, shoulders yielding under the weight of his burden, was too tired to anticipate Ambre's every move. He couldn't see the disaster coming even though he felt it. One day, while he was at work, she took the opportunity to go to a doctor at her city's central hospital. She explained the situation and pleaded with him to help her bear children. He gave a long sigh and stared at her from head to toe. Finally, in honeyed tones, he suggested amiably, "You know, there's no need to try that hard. You'll only hurt yourself further. Don't play dumb. You're very well aware of your sterility, aren't you? It's not the end of the world, you know. There are assisted procreation techniques that work very well nowadays. In vitro fertilization, for example. Why don't you try to think about it?" The young doctor tried to be as positive and comforting as he could be, but the blow had already been dealt. Ambre was in shock. Her dreams crumbled to pieces in an ocean of dust and litter. She left the hospital completely destroyed, speechless and cold and as mechanical as a robot. She heard nothing of the doctor's last kind words. All she knew was that she had to go home. Once she was outside, the sky's blinding grey light left her lost for a bit. She was obviously in the city where she had always lived, but the buildings, the cars, and the people passing by had all turned to ghostly and haggard silhouettes in a dark, upside-down world. Her sight blurred little by little as she walked aimlessly. The city crumbled into a gigantic pile of ashes. Voices of the passerby around her changed into soundless language, metallic and meaningless. Ambre managed to get to the park, mechanically, not really knowing how, a terrifying angst seizing her from inside. Seeing nothing, understanding nothing, she fell on the grass, wide-eyed. All of a sudden, the grey-filtered images of her past came back to her mind, and reality brutally hit her in the stomach. It's impossible. Why? Why me? Even though I'm normal. I'm not a piece of trash. Oh, it can't be. My dream. I wanted to be happy. She remembered. She remembered the mirror. The mirror. The mirror. The crude light above the mirror that showed her all her flaws, all her imperfections. The excruciating need to be perfect, to be flawless. Flawless like the models, the actors, the singers on every screen that were all constantly visible. To be seen, to be admired, to have every corner of yourself analyzed. Never break down, always be perfect, take care of every detail, Hide everything. Keep everything deep inside yourself, even if it means the surface will weaken and crack under the weight of lies. The mirror, in front of which she carefully put on makeup for long minutes, that miraculous product that could erase every one of those damned imperfections, those goddamn traces of humanity. Shave her legs, not leaving a single hair, frame her brows, choose the outfit that would make her look her best. Add a layer of makeup on the face to make one's identity disappear, to be replaced by a single form of beauty, a majestic beauty, an artificial beauty, an impossible beauty to attain. The mirror, in front of which she would weigh herself, in front of which she would tell herself that she should watch what she eats, become thinner, become more beautiful, more desirable. Throw up every extra, keep only what's essential, admire herself in front of the mirror. Throw up that unwanted vital pulsation, throw up what's dirty, become cleaner, inside and out. Destroy the dirt, anything dirty, become pure, immaculate, perfect. The mirror, other people's stares, the permanent mirror, vanity, believing you exist, destroying yourself bit by bit, becoming unable to survive by yourself, to stand the growing loneliness, the implacable struggle against yourself. Mind almighty against the body, forcing it to submission, forcing it to remodel itself to fit whatever you wish it to be, forcing it to become soul sworn and only avatar. Not being able to accept yourself, the endless racing against time, nature, constant effort to kill yourself, to prevent yourself from existing. An ethereal body, dreamlike, a corpse's body. The mirror is staring at the bottom of my heart. Oh, I'm sorry. He knows everything. He sees everything. I can't escape it. I cannot escape. Locked in by her obsessions, Ambre convulsed, letting out several piercing shrieks. It has to stop! It has to stop! Suddenly, the emotional pressure becomes so strong that she completely lost all sense of reality, and her brain went blank. She moved no more. She didn't pronounce a single word. Motionless on the park's grass, eyes still fixed in a terrified posture. You might have believed she was dead if she hadn't been breathing faintly. The world seemed to freeze, explode, die in an insufferable shriek of agony. Her world. The clock had struck midnight, but Cinderella wasn't ready to give up on her dream. It was 7:30 p.m. on a beautiful yet cold autumn day. The wind shook the frail trees' branches across the street. Tristan Mallory made his slow, tired way. A whirlwind of leaves caught his attention, and he stopped to contemplate them for a few minutes. A spray of colors danced around him, fragments of reds, oranges, yellows spread at random, forming a mosaic that stretched on for as far as the eye could see, endlessly. It was rare beauty in that grey and fuming city, in that noisy metropolis constantly exhaling bad air. Coming back to his senses, the 30-year-old man shook his head. Now wasn't time to be daydreaming. He had to go home. Ambre was waiting. As usual, she would probably ask him about her future pregnancy, what name they should give their kid, and how they should decorate his room. As usual, she'd worry about not seeing her flat stomach. And as usual, he would have to minimize the problem and pretend it was no big deal to delay the unavoidable. The long day weighed on his shoulders. But if he was honest with himself, work wasn't the most tiring thing in his life. Since honest, well-paid work was somewhat of a luxury these days, like any model employee, he consciously accomplished every task handed to him, and did no more or less than what was asked. No, what was destroying him was a completely different form of fatigue, an appalling and crushing solitude that had been shadowing him for years, ever since his wife had lost her head. The light tinkle of the front door opening brought him back to Earth. He was already arrived to his flat. Ambre should have been there to greet him with her wide smile. Instead, a sad and mute living room waited for him in morbid silence. He felt goosebumps travel down his spine as he entered the room. Where was she? Could it be? Could it be happening again? Driven by desperation, he didn't even take the time to hang his coat correctly, but began slamming all of the doors, one after the other, hoping she would be sleeping in some corner. Each time, the same emptiness answered his place. He felt a rising dread within. His last hope was that last door in the forbidden room beyond. He opened it slightly and peeked inside. Of course, there was no one. That would have been too easy. He fell heavily onto the sofa. The crushing solitude came back in full force, crushing him again and again, wounding his face with invisible cuts. The cuts of time. It was happening again. Ambre had gone crazy. She'd run away once more. And once more, he would have to find her before she got hurt. He would have to play the part of an impassive stranger, showing no sign of the torment devouring him alive. Tristan Mallory felt suddenly tired. He held his head in his hands and stared at the floor for long minutes. He needed to calm down, even just a little, so he could pretend he wasn't affected by it. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he got to his feet. He moved to gather all of the framed pictures that had been on the furniture and showed them away in a closet. They needed to be out of sight. If Ambre discovered the pictures of her happy alter ego too quickly, she was obviously going to wander. He stored them in a drawer and locked it. The frames didn't take up too much space. After all, there weren't that many of them, and he always put the same ones on the buffet. She would never notice it. When he was sure that there were no more pictures to put away, Tristan put his coat back on and went outside. It was cool, a bit dark, but there was still enough light to see by. It was the ideal time to take a walk. At least, that's what he would have thought. As he hurried along the sidewalk, the 30-year-old man was anything but relaxed. Nervously, he walked around her most familiar places, looking for a serenity that seemed to be out of reach. He had to find her. He had to bring her back home. While he passing by a park near his home, Tristan heard a high-pitched, almost inaudible plea. His heart jumped, and he stopped. While he passing by a park near his home, Tristan heard a high-pitched... Oh, no, I'm sorry, I do the same. In the dim light of the setting sun, he made out the silhouette of a little girl sitting on a swing with her head bowed. Tears rolled down her cheeks. He came closer slowly, so as not to surprise her, and examined her attentively. He was indeed standing in front of his wife, Ambre Mallory, who used to be so charming. She was still pretty, but she seemed to have aged prematurely. White locks here and there brightened her long hair to the point where you couldn't tell her age anymore. With that appearance, she could have been an old lady. However, she was in her 30s, like Tristan, who didn't appear any younger. Back hunched, looking haggard, eyes more lifeless than ever, she was crying. Her clothes were crumpled. She had neither coat nor scarf. There were scratches on her hands and arms, as if she had been in a fight. Did she roll on the floor? Did she harm herself? Regardless, she had almost likely gotten hurt while running away. The park was completely deserted, and she seemed to have been there for a while. She must have run away hours ago, probably since the early afternoon, otherwise she wouldn't have been in a state where she would be able to cry. She would have been motionless, like a doll, unable to show the slightest sign of life, until finally she'd come back to her senses. For a second, Tristan Mallory was tempted to leave her here,
to leave her to her fate, but he gave himself a mental slap. He couldn't leave her like that. She was his wife. He loved her. He had to take care of her, no matter what. But even so, sometimes, he almost wished she would get lost for good, that she'd disappear, so he wouldn't have to live through this endless circle again.
His conscience protested that he would feel too guilty, that he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. There was no way out. He had to live with this burden. So, he placed himself in front of her, and in a soft voice he asked, "Is something wrong?" His wife first seemed not to hear him. She was choking in her sobs, hiccuping, shaking with spasms. He was now sure of it. She had forgotten everything once again. Patiently, Tristan Mallory stroked her hair and repeated, "Why are you crying? What happened?" It took long minutes for her to calm down even a little, but finally, with a faint voice disturbed by sobs, she answered while drying her tears. "I don't know. I think I've lost something important. Really important. But I can't remember what it was." Tristan Mallory sighed, feeling a mixture of compassion and pity. Always that nagging obsession, that curse. She seemed so lost, so vulnerable. He wanted to hold her so tightly that her sadness melted away. And at the same time, within him, a voice was telling him that he shouldn't be too forceful. He shouldn't take advantage of her weakness. Ambre didn't recognize him anymore in the end. He would have to wait even if the desire to ease his own loneliness was suffocating. The woman he loved was there, in front of him, and he couldn't so much as touch her. So he tried not to lose face, to appear reassuring, but face to face with that mournful little girl, he was having a hard time. "Are you alone? Where are Mommy and Daddy?" "I don't know." "Do you live far away from here?" "I don't know." "What's your name?" "Ambre." "Well, Ambre, you can't stay out here in the wind. You're going to catch a cold. And you don't want to get sick, do you?" "No, I hate being sick." "See, you've got to go warm yourself up somewhere. The night's getting close." "But I don't know where to go." "In that case, what do you think about going over to my place? It's not far away from here, and it will make a much better sleeping place than the swing." Amber seemed weary, but she had no other way but to follow him. He gently extended his hand, and for the first time, she lifted her eyes. They were washed out, blurry with tears and hesitant. They were the eyes of a little girl stuck in a woman's body, the eyes of a woman haunted by her little girl obsession, the eyes of a trapped person. He thought it a good idea to show her a smiling face, to give himself a protecting role. Even with the fatigue, he caught her fine and frail hand and helped her get to her feet. The young lady's steps were wobbly, weak. She had probably not eaten all day long. Carefully, he guided her to his home, making sure she wouldn't trip. The 30-year-old man took off his coat and shut the door behind them. "Make yourself at home. I'll cook you something." Passing through the kitchen, he turned on the light in the living room, so his flat would look less gloomy. While roaming through his fridge looking for a good meal idea, he stole glances over the counter regularly. In the living room, Amber was still walking around, a bit wild, still on the defense. She explored this new environment by looking around, admiring the ornaments. She didn't find much to pique her interest. It was a bland house, almost too bland. There were no clues about the occupants' lives. I'm sorry. The pictures of their happy days were carefully hidden. Taking advantage of Tristan's being distracted by a packet of noodles,
She escaped to the hallway and tried to find the bathroom. She found it quickly enough before returning to the hallway. Then she noticed that all the doors were wide open, except for one. She was drawn to the doorway even before she had time to think. Intrigued, Amber felt magnetically attracted by the slightly opened door. Just one peek was all she wanted, but she couldn't see anything through the crack. Was this Bluebeard's cabinet, a frightening tomb where Tristan Mallory stored the corpses of his former wives? The little girl pushed the door open, entered the room, and switched the light on. In the kitchen, Tristan sighed. He was cooking Amber's favorite meal, but his eyes were too itchy. Shoulders plying, he noticed his wife's absence. She must have found her room, he grunted. His hands were mechanically preparing the meal, but his mind was elsewhere. Little by little, he slowed down, until he stopped completely. Still as a robot, he leaned against the wall. God, what have I done to deserve this? When will she be coming back? When is she going to wake up? His face in his hands, he cried silently in the empty living room. Will my tears reach you one day? When he felt better, he headed towards the forbidden room and caught Amber playing with stuffed animals. His gaze softened. Without a word, he went to sit next to her. On the bed, the little girl moved the stuffed animals' hands while making them speak. In her weak voice, she mimed a stuffed animal tea party and seemed to be having a lot of fun. The light was back in her eyes. Suddenly, she got mad at a plump cow and scolded her harshly. It's dirty! Stop it right now! You're making a mess! Ellie, what did I just say? It's dirty! You've got to behave yourself! And don't roll on the floor! You shouldn't make a fuss just because you didn't get what you wanted. As punishment, she sent the cow in a corner, ordering her not to move before replacing her with a pony with long eyelashes. The stuffed animal tea party hosted by the blue monkey was obviously not going as planned. The 30-year-old man eyed the little girl's every move with care. She finally noticed his presence. That evening, Tristan Mallory admired Amber as she wolfed down her food. He felt half amused, half distracted. Seeing her so happy soothed his heart a little, but at the same time, it was heartbreaking. He remembered the blissful day, already long gone. It wasn't easy, but he still remembered them. The beautiful young lady, her adorable smile, her cheerfulness, their promises. Confronted by Amber's overflowing enthusiasm, Tristan Mallory couldn't help but smile faintly, almost pitifully. Yes, that's it indeed, he kept telling himself, as if to reassure himself. All I'm doing is keeping her around until she remembers who she is and what she's lost. Waiting for her to remember, if she ever managed to someday. Tristan Mallory could have been an ordinary man, with an ordinary life if everything hadn't changed so drastically a few years ago due to the consequences of a dire event. Since that day, he was stuck in that infernal circle, a struggle that seemed never-ending. He had been so happy, fulfilled, with the woman he loved, the woman he had married. Amber, charming woman he had sworn his life to, had gone mad. He had never realized how obsessed she was about having kids, until their doctor told them she was sterile. A seemingly overcomable situation, but to her, it was as if she had been dealt the death penalty. They could have put themselves in the hands of science, or just have given up on that project altogether and created a new one that they could have been satisfied with in their everyday life. But she couldn't give up the idea. I'm sorry. Amber wasn't willing to let her little girl's dream go, or to change a word of the promised fairy tale. It was a must. It had to go that way, and that way only. So the pressure she put on herself had the better of her. She couldn't be perfect. She couldn't perfectly conform herself to the absurd norm imposed to her. Something in her head broke like a fragile thread. She had an emotional breakdown. Under her husband Tristan's bewildered eyes, she sunk insanely quickly in a madness as sudden as it was violent and from which she wouldn't return. Refusing to face reality, she escaped in a long dream, a long nightmare, where she became out of reach. Amber reverted to childhood, where everything was easier, where everything was still possible. She didn't recognize her husband anymore, or didn't want to recognize him. He had to pretend not to know her each time, and get closer to her each time, until she had a new breakdown and everything would be reset again. He had to make her happy and help her get better each time, even if it meant bending to her every will, even if it meant living in a world of pretend, even if it meant unrequited love on his part. During this cycle, once more intrigued, Amber took advantage of his absence to open a drawer she had never touched before. She found the key in her guardian's room. Inside the drawer was a big leather notebook. Surely she had found the treasure. She took it and opened it. It was a photo album. Spread on the pages were bright smiles and tender gestures. Browsing the pictures, the little girl discovered her guardian, young and fresh, in the arms of a coquettish young lady. Dressed soberly and tastefully, she was strolling on the seashore, a shawl on her shoulders, or she was in a park, holding an ice cream. But what caught her eye was a very particular picture towering in the middle of one page. Tristan, wearing a suit, was leading his lover out of a church with clumsy footsteps under a shower of flower petals. She looked so happy, so fulfilled, in her big and refined white dress that Amber was stupefied. Even more so because the bride looked exactly like her. She's so pretty. What are you looking at? Tristan's sudden appearance made her jump so quickly that she dropped the forbidden object. The 30-year-old man's gaze sobered immediately. You searched through the closet to see what my wife looked like, didn't you? She answered in a shaky voice, guilty. Yes. Are you going to scold me? Of course not. I just would have preferred you not seeing it. Why? Why don't you ever tell me about her? I want to know. He sighed, appearing upset as he looked into those begging eyes. Eyes that he had never been able to resist for long. Reluctantly, he sat down on the couch and told her how he had met the one he thought would be his lifelong partner, and related all that they had gone through together. Amber listened with wide-eyed attention. She liked the story very much. Tristan seemed to get younger as he evoked the past, describing how head over heels for her he had been, and how happy she made him. Their peaceful and ordinary everyday life was something the little girl envied. Caught up in this tale, she couldn't help but pressure him. And then, what happened? Until the light shining in the man's green eyes vanished brutally. Then she got away. Where to? Far away to a place I can't reach anymore. Every day I pray that she'll somehow hear me, that she'll wake up, that she'll remember me. I don't know if she'll ever emerge from the dream that's keeping her captive. Is she dead? Sometimes it feels like it, but no, she's alive, just in a different world from mine. If I could have joined her, I would have. I would have sacrificed everything for her. And today, she's forgotten me forever. That's sad. Tristan sighed again, head down, as a heavy crushing silence came between them. Could anyone imagine his suffering? Could anyone imagine what it felt like to be in his shoes? To see that your special someone couldn't recognize you anymore, that she had forgot everything about you and your relationship. When Ambre, the little girl stuck in a woman's body, asked him why he was crying, he wanted to scream, "Because I love you! And we were so happy together, because I can't live without you, because I need you, your affection, because I'm all alone, because you're my wife and the woman I love. I beg of you, come back to me, get a hold of yourself and snap out of it." But it was useless. He had tried already, tried to shake her, to talk to her like she was his wife. But if he did, she would remain terrified and stay away from him, and, crying, she would tell him he shouldn't scold her. So, he would give up. He stopped trying to get his role back. He kept pretending, and his suffering got worse day after day, like a sly disease trying to consume him further. Fake a smile, forget about yourself, don't think about anything other than reassuring her. How could one go on like that without being worn out? Tristan Mallory was no Superman. He was often on the verge of losing it. He despaired to remark on progress and had no hope for healing. Would Amber ever return to normal? He didn't believe it anymore. One evening, when he was feeling more tense than usual, he dared to yell at the young lady who was doing her best to appear attractive. He immediately regretted it, but the deed was done. Amber's voice was trembling dangerously. Getting close, he noticed her frenetically shaking hands. Eyes wide open, soaked in tears, she exploded. "I'm sorry. I want you to love me. I want you to look at me. Why don't you ever look at me? Am I not good enough? Is that it? I will never be as good as she was, will I?" She? But, Amber, who are you talking about? Dumbfounded, Tristan held her in his arms as tightly as he could. No, he definitely couldn't understand. He couldn't understand such intense and sudden sobs. He only loved one person in this world, only one. How could she believe for a second that she had been beaten by someone else? Reassured by his gestures, Amber wanted to explain herself. "Your wife. I can see her departure laughed. You're very sad. I wanted to bring a smile back to your face. I wanted to take her place, so you'd forget about her." For a split second, Tristan Mallory was breathless. It was surreal. He would have pinched himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming, but no. The pain in his chest was far too real, too pitifully carved in him. Amber, locked up in her little girl's dream, was becoming jealous of herself. She was trying to suppress her happy alter ego of the past. She was trying to remove herself from her husband's memories, as if to rewrite the past, like some form of unconscious suicide. How could he answer such a declaration? How could he find the right words? Catching his breath with difficulty, the 30-year-old man took Amber by the shoulders and looked her in the eyes for a long time. He had to wake her up. He had to make her realize. He had to think of a way to tell her. After a sigh, he affirmed, "Listen, I will never be able to forget my wife, alright? It's impossible. But that doesn't mean I don't want you. The exact opposite, actually. You're very dear to me, Amber. You hear me? I need you. You already have her place. So please stop crying. Don't make it harder than it is." The young girl shyly dried her tears, and her features changed to an adorably naive expression. She looked sincerely despaired. "You're okay with me? What made you think I'd abandon you, huh?" "Nothing. It's just that you seem to love her so much. I'm a bit jealous." "Why is that?" "I don't know. When I look at those pictures, I can't help but tell myself I must absolutely make you happy. I think I think I love you. Tristan felt all the courage and determination he had worked up melting, and he started sobbing as well. Did she recognize him? Just a little? Was that a sign from her subconscious? Did she begin to get a grip on herself? But I love you too. It's always been like that. I love you so much, it makes me sick. For real? You're not treating me like a kid? Of course not. Then prove it. How should I? Show me you love me like a man loves a woman. Amber seemed that sad on it, so Tristan slowly and softly kissed her lips. The warm and pleasurable feeling went to his head. For a few seconds, he felt as if he was holding his wife in his arms. He thought she had really come back. The delicate vanilla-scented skin reminded him of happy days, long afternoons spent in the sun, of laughter, of peaceful evenings under the light of the stars, or by a fire, or beneath a shared umbrella in a storm. She was here, so close, so far, within a finger's reach. He only had to close his eyes and believe in this dream. The illusion smiled faintly at him, and at his limit, he embraced her. If you only knew how much I love you. He had so many things he wished to tell her, so many that the words got stuck in his throat, unable to escape. So, since he lacked the words to make her understand what he was feeling, he used his body. As dawn's rays of light crept through the window, Amber was profoundly asleep, lying atop Tristan's still lukewarm body. Eyes surrounded by dark circles, the weight of regrets, a fatigue he couldn't get rid of, he stared at her with a sad smile on his face. It was only a dream, right? When you'll wake up, you'll be a kid again, right? The only answer he got was a light groaning. Softened by such a serene face, he left a kiss on her fresh cheeks. As soon as he did, the sleeping lips spread to form a happy smile. I wonder what you're dreaming about. Say, won't you invite me over there? Tristan Mellowy was tired of the infernal circle that broiled his prayers in a permanent cacophony. Once more, to please her, he mimicked a fake wedding ceremony without telling her it was a fake joy. Never again would the fresh and innocent smile of the pictures return. The masquerade dragged on until the final act. Amber asked to have kids again, and her discovering the truth one way or another would invariably make her go mad, since her obsession was so strong. To counter the numerous relapses, the 30-year-old man often went to the hospital with his wife to discuss with psychiatrists in charge of her and to discuss the eventual progresses. So, Tristan, how's Amber lately? Did she get a little better? Still nothing. The doctor frowned, but it was a compassionate expression. He was in charge of the Mallory case for some years by now, and he felt particularly powerless in front of such avoidance on the part of the young lady. He had tried it all, without success. You never know. Is that why you've called me, Doctor? He took a pin and played with nervously while staring at Tristan. No, to be honest, I knew Amber would relapse again. One of my colleagues went to talk with me the other day. Apparently, your wife went to the hospital and did the usual. She ran into an intern that didn't know how to deal with the situation. I often explain her case to the newbies, but between theory and practice, the poor boy tried his best. He told her the truth while trying to sugarcoat it to make her reflect on it. She had another angst crisis, of course. By the time he told her to sit down to call for me, she was already gone. If it had been me, I would have tried to buy some time. Anyway, what's done is done. There's no need of There's no need to apologize, Doctor. It's not your fault. You know as well as I do that she often has breakdowns, and lying to her about it doesn't do any good. Even so, I booked today's appointment so I could check on how you're faring and how she'd been since that unfortunate incident with my colleague. Nothing's changed. The doctor sighed. He stuck the pen in his coat pocket. Nervously scratching his beard, he murmured in an understanding tone, "Really, I'm impressed. I don't know how you can manage to get by like this, Tristan. In your place, I wouldn't be able to cope. But I still have to keep you tracked too. You never know. You're not safe from having a breakdown just like her." I totally understand, Doctor. You know, every cycle, I try to do things differently. But in the end, I'm tired, worn out. I've lost all hope. So all that I can do for her is to make her as happy as possible during that golden time where she's living a perfect childhood. All that's left of the woman I love is a shadow, so I hope she'll find rest someday. The two men were contemplating Amber, who was far away in the hospital's hallways, playing like a little girl. Suddenly Tristan broke the silence, his voice trembling. "Sometimes I wonder if she is ever going to get out of that prison she built around herself to avoid suffering. Will she accept and face the outside world? Or is she going to live in that eternal golden dream where everything's perfect forever? I wish I could promise you she will, that she'll wake up from that long nightmare. But something inside of me thinks she's never going to question her obsessions. Which isn't a man's waste. Because of that, she's forsaken herself from a life that could have been wonderful." Meanwhile, Amber Mallory was cheerfully talking to what she thought to be another little girl of her age. In fact, the young lady was madly talking to her reflection in the mirror with dead eyes, still stuck in that never-ending dream free of hardships. "You know what? I've got someone I love. Yes, for real. I'm even soon going to marry him. And we'll be happy until the end of time and have lots of kids, just like in fairy tales. How could it be any other way? You're right. Every day will be a feast. If only I didn't have that strange feeling. I think I've lost something important, really important. But I can't remember what it was." The end. Writing, project leader Helia, art Mellow and Morsi, music Kimino Roganes, programming cool. Yeah. Wow. I didn't imagine that this story would go this way. As I said before, it's a novel. So I just read a story to you. You don't need to watch it. You can just listen to my voice if you like. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't like my voice. Who knows? But yeah. Difficult story. Something that can happen to, I guess, every one of us. Like breaking. And I thought it would be a happy story, but sadly, no. I seem to have a good, how can I say, grip on the sad things right now. Okay, yeah, whatever. I stop talking here. I let you alone with your thoughts about the story. Don't get too sad about it. And hopefully you don't break. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Or have a nice night. Who knows? Whenever you listen it. Bye bye.